Hi, I'm Erica Smith, and welcome to beautiful Bok Tower Gardens. We're going to take a tour through our gardens, and we're going to start with Hammock Hollow, our children's garden. We opened Hammock Hollow in September 2016, so the gardens are really looking beautiful, and I'm so glad you're going to join me on this great day. So let's just take a walk, and we're going to start here at Hammock Hollow. So Hammock Hollow was really designed to be a garden for children, and it's a place for children to really engross themselves in nature. And you're going to see, and you almost have to think about what these gardens look like from a pint-sized viewpoint. So imagine as you look across these ferns and across these trees, it's almost like a garden that goes on forever. And so when kids come into this area, you can really see how they change. And so this is a place for you to really explore nature with all of your senses, everything from touch to, here we have some little ones that are playing in the dirt. So this is an indigo snake, actually one of our endangered wildlife species. And so the kids love to create sand sculptures, to touch and feel, and it's just a relaxing place. And we have kids that come out almost every day to enjoy our gardens. And as we walk through, we're going to walk into our Riverwalk area. And the Riverwalk area does have a water feature. The kids are in control. They actually get to push the button that starts the pattern. And the fountains make about 29 different water patterns. And as we walk through here, we're going to actually have some water vapor that comes up, so they really feel like they're in this magical place. It can cool off. It's great because kids that are in a stroller or wheelchair can enjoy this water feature. It's covered in really great wildlife, or I should say plants and flowers. They really do feel like they're in a different world. So let's walk down through our limestone cave structures. And it's really a place to imagine and to learn about what surrounds us in this natural world. So we will do story time down here, all kinds of activities. It's fun for the kids to really feel like they're on an adventure, and they kind of feel like they've been transported to a different place. So throughout Hammock Hollow, there are things to climb on. There are nature projects. It's really a place to learn. And there's only one entrance in and one entrance out, so it's a really safe, protected spot. So we see lots of families that kind of camp out here in the center in this nice shady area. So we have everything from a library to musical instruments that they can play on, structures that they can climb on. Right now we can see some kids that are having a lot of fun in the Edward Bach Word Garden, so they're actually creating poetry on the ground. We have plenty of arts and crafts here in Doodlebug Art Place. There are costumes. There's another water feature. It's really just a great place to come and explore. There's no lines. There's no waiting. It's just, a great place to enjoy Central Florida, and you're surrounded in this beautiful shady hammock. So as we walk through, we'll take a look at some of the other structural features that we have here in the garden. And 2 years ago, this really was flat land. It was covered in dirt, and you can see how fast the plants are growing in this area because most of them are native. So you have some American beautyberry here. As we walk through, you're going to see lots of benches. So this place became not only for children, but for the young and the young at heart. So we see everything from grandparents to even teenagers really enjoy this part of the garden because it's nice and shady. If you can take a look, this is also kind of a refuge for birds and wildlife. We have some wild blueberries that are growing. They're a lot smaller than what you would typically find in a grocery store because this is kind of the wild version. What we eat now is a hybrid of what these blueberries are. So the birds love to eat them. It's a great birding trail. We see quite a few birds that come in from our heritage grounds and our preserve grounds, and they're constantly migrating back and forth between here in the gardens and in the protective preserve grounds. There always seems to be kind of a natural breeze. That's why I really like this part of the garden. These structures, they're actually for tortoises, and gopher tortoises are very important to us here on the Lake Wells Ridge and to Bok Tower Gardens, we really embrace this endangered species because it's a keystone species. And that becomes very important, especially for ecosystems and for biodiversity. So 29 different species actually use a gopher tortoise burrow. So we created these kind of man-made gopher tortoise burrows as a way to teach children about why it's important to preserve wildlife as well as to preserve, natural spaces and natural places. So 29 species, everything from frogs to insects to birds, depend upon the gopher tortoise burrow. So if we are to, have an extinction of that species, we're going to lose 29 other species too. So that's a pretty important story for children to learn as well as for adults to learn. So Bok Tower Gardens has really become this place of great learning. It's a beautiful environment, and you're really connected to all the nature that surrounds us. So as we walk through, we're going to walk into our backyard ramble. And the backyard ramble is really special because we allow families to come in and help us plant in this area. And at first I thought, that's crazy. Who's going to come and want to plant? Wouldn't they want to do that in their own yards? But we had close to 40 families that came out and helped us plant some of the fruits and vegetables that are growing in this area. We have everything from Seminole pumpkin that's growing along here to moringa. And moringa is fascinating. It has 30 times more proteins and nutrients than typical spinach. So this moringa tree actually could feed close to a village as it grows and advances. We have some wild onion and chive growing, peppers, mammoth dill. Mammoth dill is not only tasty, right? We wouldn't have dill pickles without dill, but it's also a great pollinator plant. So you can see all the natural pollinators that are coming in, and without pollinators, we don't have food. So pretty important that we create these spaces for pollinator plants. And so you can see, because we have so many pollinator plants growing in this area, you see all the butterflies that are coming in. It's really just a relaxing space. And we love the fact that now here at Bok Tower Gardens, we really are creating this place for a new generation of visitors. And you can see that, we can see that in our visitation, that it's really changing. And we love that now we're able to appeal to anyone from 8 months old all the way to over 100. This is just a great place to come and, learn what natural flora is about. We're not a botanical garden, but we are a garden that really embraces what natural Central Florida ecosystems are. And you're going to see that as we continue to walk through. So all of these areas opened in 2016. We opened 8 acres of new gardens, and that added on to our historic Olmsted Gardens. So we're going to walk through our outdoor kitchen and our edible garden. And these are gardens that really are designed for you to pinch and touch and I guess even taste. We have quite a few visitors that try our herbs. And the kids are starting to learn that too. We were watching some of our kids that come here quite a few times, and they've already been trained to touch and pinch and smell. It's really cute when you see a 3-year-old that's leaning down to smell the rosemary. So these are all of our herb gardens. Planted in our orchard are peaches, persimmons, papaya, and pomegranate. We also recently planted some nectarines. And I love this garden. I love the outdoor kitchen. We do culinary events, cooking classes. This is really a hub for activity. But this garden changes. So every time you come out here, you're going to see something new. So we looked at the wild blueberries in the children's garden. This is actually a hybrid blueberry. So as long as the birds stay away, we'll have some really nice blueberries for blueberry pie and blueberry cobbler. Have some grapevines with muscadine. Our tomatoes are starting to come in. We'll be replanting this area. This is the last of our winter garden, and then we'll be moving into our summer garden. And as we move in, you're going to see a lot more peppers. The plants for a summer garden, are spicy, so think salsa. What would you find in salsa? Lots of tomatoes, lots of peppers, lots of onions. So this is a really great place to learn that food doesn't come in packages. It doesn't come in foam. It actually grows in the ground. And you have not lived till you've seen about 30 children learn that carrots come from the ground, and they're not in, these little tiny carrot sticks. So it is a lot of fun, and people love to come in this garden, and we encourage them to touch and pinch and taste. So we'll do green beans over this in the summertime. It's a lot of fun. So let's head into our wild garden and take a look. We're going to go actually through 4 very unique Florida ecosystems. So let's just take a walk up the hill. You can see some of our raspberries coming in too. So the wild garden is this beautiful contrast between the very orderly homestead gardens and now this very wild garden. So these are the new gardens that we built. And we actually, when we came and put this garden in, we used a control burn to actually burn off all the vegetation. Then we had horticulturalists that went out into all the natural Florida ecosystems and collected seed from the native plants that were growing. And then we replanted them in this area. So this is ever changing. So you can almost see this beautiful contrast between the very orderly gardens and then this very wild Central Florida ecosystem. So we're going to walk through 4. So the very first part of our tour right now is this upland pine savanna. And this is typical of what you find here in Central Florida. If we look really closely, we're going to probably see some wildlife. In the morning, you might see wild turkeys, you might see gopher tortoises. You never know what's going to be in this area. But as we walk, I'll point out some of the really pretty natural wildflowers. We need some rain, but this is called passion vine or passiflora. You can actually see it. It makes this really pretty purple flower. There's some cardinal flower that's growing and blooming right now. So when I walk through this area, I really like to point out that everything to this side of the pathway is hand of man, and everything on this side of the path is Mother Nature. So they really mirror each other really nicely. So this is a recreation of everything that you would typically find in the Central Florida ecosystem. So the upland pine savanna is kind of covered in these really natural grasses, and that's important because as the morning dew hits, the grasses really collect all the moisture, and so that's what keeps them thriving in this area. So they are very drought tolerant. They don't need a lot of water, but they're they grow in this really unique wild pattern. You can hear our singing tower in the background. So we'll kind of walk. You never know what you might see. We definitely see lots of songbirds through here because as we walk, we're going to slowly see a natural oak hammock that will form, and the oaks create almost like a canopy. And it's great for wildlife. They really enjoy that ecosystem. But you're going to see some of that passion vine growing naturally along here, and then we recreate it on the other side of the pathway. So I'm always on the lookout for gopher tortoises. We see quite a few that go back and forth. We have some cactus that's planted in here, and gopher tortoises love to eat the yellow flower of a cactus, and the cactus are blooming right now. So you never know. We'll have to keep our eyes out to see if we see any wildlife. We've had a couple of hummingbird sightings, so that's exciting. They like the cardinal flower that's growing. And then if we're quiet, you can hear the songbirds. So now we're kind of moving into this oak hammock. And so if you've brought your hiking boots, we have hiking trails that start from this point and go all the way to the front entrance. It's a 1.5 mile entry that you drive through. So the hiking trails go all the way around to the tower, and they start from this point. If you don't have your hiking boots, of course, you can come and just walk along the trails. We have a ribbon of paved pathway that goes through all of our gardens. So if you have a stroller or wheelchair, completely accessible. You can hear the tower in the background. I don't know if we'll see any turkeys this morning. It's a little too warm. You see them in the mornings. They like to hide underneath the boardwalk. So we're moving into our third ecosystem. And the third ecosystem is not necessarily what we have here on the ridge. This is closer to what our natural environment looks like. But it's a wetland prairie. So we are in kind of our dry season. So as the summer rains come in, it will flood. It'll be a wetland prairie. This will continue to be drive the hammock. And the plants that were designed or planted in this area were really designed to attract pollinators and butterflies. So there's quite a few plants that are planted along the base of the boardwalk that make for this wonderful habitat for many different varieties of butterflies. So this is our wetland prairie. And it's really peaceful here. It's always very peaceful. You're kind of away from all the visitors. It really makes you feel like you've been transformed. So we have our wetland prairie off to this side and our wildlife pond. And the wildlife pond is interesting because it's actually being filtered by a natural filtration system, and we're going to see that right up here. It's called the BAM, bioabsorption material. It was developed by the University of Central Florida, and you can see it along the path here. So the water is pumped in, it goes through this layer of terracotta bioabsorption material, and then it's filtered into our wildlife pond. So we're using kind of a natural filtration system. So this is a lot like a giant aquarium is really what you're looking at. And we've planted it with so many pollinator plants. So you can see the butterflies. You can see one of the red cardinal flowers that's coming up right there. In the fall, this is all wildflowers. It's very beautiful. So the garden does change every day. Every day there's something new to look at. There's a new plant that blooms, or something has attracted a different species of butterfly, and you really get that feeling of timelessness. And I think that's really important because we're becoming so disconnected from nature. Everybody's got a screen or a phone or something like that. And so to get out and to really, breathe fresh air is important. And you feel this almost like natural grounding when you're here at the gardens. It's one of those, you already feel the tension in your shoulders. You feel all the kind of the weight of the world drops off. So in this area, this is called our bog. And this is a fascinating, well, maybe not the most beautiful garden that we have here at Bok Tower Gardens, but it's certainly the most fascinating. So you can see the pitcher plants that are growing in this area. And we actually found these seeds in North Florida. So we had to recreate this bog. And the bog is almost a daily kind of experiment because we have to keep the soil in a very negative pH. So it's a very acidic soil in this area, and so that's what is keeping these pitcher plants growing and thriving. But because they grow in such acidic soil, they need to add protein to their diet. So the mosquitoes that they attract, the mosquitoes actually come in, they have this really sweet substance that kind of attracts the flies and mosquitoes, and they fall into this sticky sweet, and they become digested by the plant. So they're actually carnivorous plants. If we were to pick one of these and open up the interior, it would just be filled with flies all the way from top to bottom. So it's a fascinating plant. The kids love the fact that it is, carnivorous, so it's digesting the insects. But it's just a great way to learn that there is so much biodiversity in Florida and in all of our nature in spaces. So it is very wild. It is very different than what you typically see in a botanical garden, and there's such, a great wealth of information and knowledge to learn. So let's just continue our walk. You can see some of the really pretty wildflowers are kind of coming in, and they will continue to thrive and get bigger over time. We do have our windows on the pond, which is a bird blind, and it has been around the garden since the early 1970s. It's kind of like nature's television. So that is still located in this area. And then we just have this really nice pathway that we're going to walk through. This is a thicket, and we have some beautyberry that's growing. You never know what wildlife you might see in this area. This morning when we were touring through, we had a rascally bunny. We are having a hard time keeping the wild rabbits out of our edible garden. We created kind of nature's best salad bar for them. So, of course, they have really helped keep all of our vegetables in track. There's a cardinal right there. It's coming to say hello to us this morning. So these are or the paths you can walk through. We have our mulch paths that everybody knows is great rock gravel, and if you look really closely, you might find some fossils in this area. When we first put this rock down during the expansion, it was filled with fossils. The kids like to come out and find them. This was actually given to us from the phosphate mines. And so the path that we're going to walk on now is really how Edward Bach and our landscape architect, Frederick Law Olmsted Jr., intended visitors to come into the gardens. This was the experience that he wanted them to have. So the gardens were started in the 1920s. And so the gardens were built first, and then the singing tower. So we are a green garden. We were designed by Frederick Law Olmsted Jr. And you have to kind of go back in American history. So go back to the 1920s. You know, Florida was kind of this undiscovered, wild place. And Edward Bach had a winter home in a community, the Mountain Lake community that's off to the west. And he would, at night, walk up Iron Mountain. We're about to walk up Iron Mountain. And he would sit down and he would watch the sunset. And I will tell you, there is, you know, Bach Tower Gardens is probably the most beautiful place to see a sunset. It is gorgeous. The gardens become bathed in this beautiful golden light. And so he would go up and he would watch the sunset, and that's where he was inspired to really give a gift back to the American people. So he was an immigrant. He came over to America as a boy from the Netherlands. His family had kind of fallen on hard times. And so they came to the United States to kind of, you know, have a new, fresh start. And so he really, as a child, learned how to pull himself up from his bootstraps. And, you know, he made money, he had odd jobs, and he worked his way up through the journalism world and became editor of the Ladies' Home Journal. At the time, it had the largest readership of any periodical in the world. It had the, you know, the largest readership. And so he was the editor for many years. As he retired, he decided to kind of give a gift back. And so he built these beautiful gardens from this wonderful place that he discovered here in Central Florida. So we're going to start at our monument marker. And this kind of marks the 1929 opening of the gardens. And this is the original entrance in the way that Olmsted intended the gardens to be enjoyed. So as we kind of walk through here, I'll give you a quick little story about Olmsted. So Olmsted Jr., his father was probably the most famous architect in the United States. They built the mall, they built Central Park, the Biltmore in North Carolina, and so you're going to really see that style of architecture. And we have a letter that Olmsted wrote to Mr. Bach. Mr. Bach wanted this to be a very serene and beautiful place. So he, you know, instructed Olmsted, and in the letter he says, if you want to make me mad, plant magenta flowers in my garden. So Olmsted wrote him back, and a really funny anecdote is Olmsted was colorblind, and he wouldn't be able to tell if they were pink flowers or white flowers, but he knew that, you know, we enjoy contrast, and so he knew that having color in the garden would be important. So he wrote him back and said, you know, we can't tell what happens. I like to, and the phrase is, I like to plant thick, thin, quick. So plant as much as you can so that people can see this big, beautiful garden, and then we'll edit as we go along and we'll take out things that just aren't working. Well, we have a letter about a year later that Mr. Bach instructs him to plant 8,000 more magenta azaleas. So to make a long story short, all right, they knew that this was going to be a place that people were going to find beauty, they were going to find inspiration, and we're so glad because we have the most beautiful azaleas in Central Florida growing, as well as a beautiful collection of camellias. So we're glad that Olmsted had the foresight to say, you know what, let's just see what happens. So as we walk through, this is going to be the way and the path that was originally created by Olmsted. So from this viewpoint, we can't really see the tower, even though the tower is on a 200-foot elevation, and the tower adds another 205 feet to that. But we can't see the tower. That was intentional. This is kind of, he wanted you to be transported and away from all the distractions of the world, and you would slowly, as you walk through, you would start to see the tower kind of rise in all its glory in front of you. So we're going to kind of maybe be a little quiet and listen to the birds and all the natural things that are happening as we kind of make our descent up Iron Mountain. So I'm just going to kind of let you enjoy the viewpoint and see what I'm seeing. And we'll just make our way up. There are a few things to kind of point out from his horticultural interests. So the peacock ginger is starting to come in. It makes a beautiful, almost lilac purple flower in the summer. You can see the last of our azaleas, the last remaining few. You know, every day is a good day to visit the gardens, but if you're really wanting to see that beautiful blooming color, probably February and March is the perfect time to visit. You can hear the blue jays. So the garden initially was built as a bird sanctuary, and Edward Bach, he loved the sound of nightingales, and so they imported nightingales, and unfortunately the wild birds that were here weren't too fond of the nightingales, and so that bird experiment didn't work out too well. And then we brought in flamingos, and we had flamingos for quite some time, and that bird experiment did not work well. So anytime that we've ever imported bird species into the bird sanctuary, it's not worked out too well. So we've learned to listen to Mother Nature, and now we really embrace all the wild species that we have. So you never know what you might see in the trees. We might see a woodpecker, or we saw some swallowtail kites earlier this morning. The irises are coming into bloom. This is called walking iris, and it will kind of get really big and heavy and kind of fall into the ground, so it looks like it's kind of walking across the path, but that's how it gets its name. But it's a beautiful blue. It's a summer bloom. If you have a chance, you'll want to add a visit to Pinewood Estate to your ticket. It is an extra fee, but it will take you on a tour of a 20-room mansion that is connected to Pockdower Gardens that was owned by Mr. Buck. And so we hear that a lot of times. No, it was owned by Mr. Buck. No, it was owned by Mr. Buck. So here at the gardens, we have the Bocks and the Bucks. So his home was built again as a winter retreat. We purchased it in the 80s and turned it into a historical tour. At Christmas, it's fully decorated for Christmas. This year, the theme is Home for the Holidays. So we're actually going in and learning more about the Buck family and what it was like to winter here in the 1930s and 40s. So it's kind of those bygone era, this beautiful time in American history, and what it was like to kind of have these grand vacations. You know, people forget what it's like, to have formal dinners and, the formality of the 30s and 40s. And so we're introducing a new generation to that idea. And then we're still making our path, and we still can't see the tower from this vantage point. But we're about 3/4 of the way up Iron Mountain. So it's an easy walk. But the best part about it is once you've done this, that gives you plenty of exercise, and you can have an ice cream cone in our cafe, or a beautiful salad sandwich, or a double scoop of ice cream, actually. So you get your exercise in for the day. Let's get a little bit of history, a little bit of nature, and some great fresh air. And we are almost to the pinnacle of our tour, right around this corner. And it really does, even though you work here, it really does, you know, kind of take your breath away every time you see the tower. And here we are. So welcome to the top of Iron Mountain and to our singing tower. So this is the world's largest instrument. A lot of people say, is it a castle? It's not a castle. It is a musical instrument. There are 6-ton bells that are housed up at the top of the tower. And so if you look at the top, you're going to see a ring of herons. And then about a third of the way down, you're going to see a ring of eagles. And then you're going to see some beautiful tile work all the way down. If you're lucky, you can get a picture with the full reflection and the reflection pond. And then you can see the brass door. And as we get closer, we'll talk about the brass door. But the pink building material is actually Georgia marble. The brown is coquina stone, and it's coquina from the same mine that they built the fort in St. Augustine. And probably at the time, some of the world's best artisans working on the tower. So the architect was Milton Maderi. He won the gold medal for architecture the year that the tower was dedicated. Lee Lowry was the stone carver. Samuel Yellen did all of the steel work. And then J.H. Dulles Company did all the tile. And so it was this feat for American architecture and American art, and it really did embrace Art Deco and art of the time. And we have letters that Mr. Bach, when he was inviting these artisans to work on the tower, and what he instructed them, and I think this is fantastic, he wanted them to give the best that they had to give. So when they would say, do you want this or do you want that? He would simply just tell them, is that the best that you have? I kind of laugh. Our president sometimes tells me that, is that the best that I have? So, you know, when you think about inspiration, this really is a tower that was designed based on inspiration. It is definitely a symbol of beauty, of grace, and it really does represent some of the best in American art that we have to offer. So we'll just kind of continue our tour through, and as we get closer to the tower, you're going to see up close some of the really beautiful sculpture that's on the tower. It is a testament to art, and you have to think, all right, so the tower is dedicated February 1st, 1929. We're really, little did we know what would happen in October, which would be the big crash. So this is kind of the pinnacle of American ingenuity and all those things that were happening. So, it has stood as a symbol for hope for nearly 9 decades. We will celebrate our 90th anniversary next year, and we are probably the first Florida attraction. So this is where it all kind of started. This was, what attracted people to this area, and we have everything from a Rice Krispies box that had the tower on it to salt and pepper shakers, anything you can imagine from a tourism aspect, they have done it on the Singing Tower. So it really has been kind of an icon for Florida, if not the United States. And we'll just kind of continue, because this would have been where the dedication actually happened. They set up actually right over here a stage, and Calvin Coolidge, who was the president at the time, gave the dedication speech. They had a choir of 5,000. I mean, I can't even imagine what that would be like to coordinate 5,000 people. We have pictures of trucks and cars that just went for miles and miles and miles of people lining up. This was where you were supposed to be in 1929. This was it. So we're very excited to have that heritage, and we're going to continue that for our 90th anniversary and really introducing a new generation to what these gardens are and what they mean to us here. So as we walk through, we're going to see the Calvin Coolidge palm tree that he planted on the day of our dedication. So this palm tree is nearly 90 years old. Mrs. Coolidge was here with him. We in our archives actually know a lot about that day because they kept everything. So we actually know on the menu what they served on the train. It's fascinating to go back in and see what it was like, 90 years ago. So this is the Calvin Coolidge palm. His wife planted a palm. Unfortunately, a storm many, many years ago took her palm out, but we still have his palm. During the rise of Pokemon, this was a big Pokemon hangout. It's still a big hangout because you can see some great native fish in our ponds. And then really interesting, right close to the Calvin Coolidge palm, we now have a new garden feature, and we can thank Hurricane Irma for this. So this tree was knocked down during the Hurricane Irma storm. And what makes it so unique is it will continue to grow. The roots are completely submerged in the soil, but we are giving it some vitamin injections to make sure that it stays healthy. And it created, the perfect arch. So sometimes storms, they can, while they are devastating, sometimes they can give you beautiful garden features. So we kind of rallied around the tree as employees here. This is kind of a symbol of all of us working so hard to bring the gardens back after the hurricane. And it surrounds our pond. So you can see wildlife growing here, or not growing, but visiting here. You can see the beautiful ferns that grow. In the summertime, the Victoria lilies will be planted, and they grow anywhere from 8 to 9 feet in diameter and hold up to 80 pounds of weight. Because they're from South America, they can't take the cold weather, so we have to wait till the nights aren't as cool, and then we'll plant those. And we have everything growing. Bromeliads growing in this area, these really wonderful ferns. There's some iris, orchid. And then the garden really does touch all of your senses. So definitely sight. You can hear the birds. You can smell this really great fragrance. And people say, what is that smell? And they think it's, roses, or you have some flower garden. It's actually the tea olive trees. And that was a Olmsted design. He knew that the tea olive had such a great fragrance, and it's kind of that year round. So the tea olive trees are located right here, so we're getting that wonderful smell. So it really does, engage all of your senses when you're walking through the gardens. We do weddings here. We have all kinds of celebrations. So the gardens can, birthday parties to weddings, it's just a great place to mark those points in your life, like a wedding or a birthday. I think these are beautiful. These are nun's orchid, and they're just a gorgeous flower. It's a summer bloom, so I like to see that, especially in this really green part of the garden. It's very exotic. And then that is a bird's nest fern. And so we're going to get a little closer to the tower, and we'll be able to see some of the art up close. So Edward Bok was kind of this very pivotal man in American history. If you have ever a chance to read his book, it's The Americanization of Edward Bok. It actually won a Pulitzer. And, things like living room. I don't know if anybody knows the story, but he coined that phrase. Back in, the turn of the century, we had parlors. And a parlor was a place that nobody got to sit, right? It was perfect. Don't sit in the parlor. Don't mess up the parlor. And Edward Bok thought that was ridiculous. Why build a house where the family can't gather and talk and enjoy? So he coined the phrase living room. And he thought that should be a place where the family should gather, that you should interact with your family. It's fascinating to know around the turn of the century, he was recognizing that Americans were becoming very disconnected from each other and from nature. Imagine what he would think now in 2018, what that would be like, that we would have these devices that we have now. But he wanted to create a place where people could come back to nature, could find themselves again, and that's what this garden represents. So we're in front of our beautiful tower, and we can see the brass door The brass door tells the story of creation, starting with God created the heavens and earth, all the way down to Adam and Eve are dispelled from the Garden of Eden. So the brass door sits directly in front of Edward Bach's grave. It is a little bit of a bittersweet story. He died about a year after the tower was dedicated, and this is his final resting place. And you know, it's so tranquil in this area. And you know, kids love to feed the fish. We have koi and tilapia and some other things, natural fish, native fish in this area. And everybody kind of does take a step back and a deep breath when they're here in this area. You know, people just naturally lower their voice a little bit, and you know, you really do feel like you're in this sanctuary. And that's exactly what Edward Bach wanted to build, a beautiful sanctuary that people could come here and relax and get a little bit of respite and reconnect with each other and reconnect with nature. So, I mean, that's a story that has stood the test of time. You know, 90 years ago, he was recognizing that. And so, as we kind of make our way around, I'm going to show you a little hidden gem that is a little off the beaten path. It is our peace lantern, and it is right around here, the corner. And it's a neat story. The gentleman that created this worked in Mr. Bach's household for about 2 years. He came to the United States. His name is Usabar Tizito. And he learned English from Mr. Bach, as well as Mr. Bach was a huge proponent of world peace. He actually created the American Peace Prize. Edward Bach went through World War I and saw the atrocities of war and wanted to make sure that that never happened again. Unfortunately, we know from history, World War II broke out, and they called him Suda. He went back to Japan and was stuck in Japan when World War II broke out. He saved for many, many years to build a tribute to Mr. Bach, who was his mentor. And so he created this beautiful peace lantern. It was carved in Japan and shipped here in the 1950s. And we have the letter that he sent to Mr. Bach's widow, to Mary Louise Curtis. And he basically wrote in he didn't care where in the garden that we put the peace lantern, but only that it should be within eyeshot of Mr. Bach, so that ever he should call, he would be able to answer that call. And so, as you can see, we do keep them within eyeshot. So it's kind of one of those little hidden gems that you'll find in the garden. Just a beautiful tribute to a man that dedicated his life to really getting us to understand how important world peace was, how important our connections to family, how important as Americans it is to embrace beauty. And so we have this beautiful tower, this wonderful music that floats over the gardens. We have live concerts at 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock, 365 days a year, as a dedication to the beauty. And music is kind of that balm for the soul. And, you know, people just love to hear this wonderful music that floats down. It really does give you this sense of peace, of tranquility. So as we're walking through, you can see some of the beautiful art of Samuel Yellen. And then some of the carvings of Lee Lowry. We'll pause a bit and just kind of listen. I think he wants to feed the fish.
Yeah, we have to. Yeah, we did that. Yeah. Well, come here. You have to get food.
So we'll keep walking. You can see the beautiful windows that Lee Lowry carved in that Art Deco style, as well as the pelicans that are along that fretwork there. And we have some early drawings in our archives. They were trying to decide how, you know, the carol l'honneur would get back and forth across the moat. And they actually have a drawing of a small boat. I guess that would have been like the world's smallest boat to go across the moat. They quickly scrapped that and said, no, that's probably not going to work. So they had the, yeah, you never know what you might see. So just a water snake. He's going to say hello and do his business, go about his business. You know, we are a nature preserve, so you really never know what you might see. For the most part, they're more frightened than you are. So as we come up this way, you're going to see this really beautiful vista. And it really does show you how beautiful Central Florida is and how gorgeous these views are. And so that's a really important part of our heritage, that we preserve this view shed. And we want to make sure that, you know, the next 3 generations get to enjoy this as well. So that's very important to our mission, that we really embrace what Florida and what Central Florida and the Ridge and what that ecosystem and that biodiversity is here at the gardens. So last kind of little feature is our sundial, and this is how they brought the bells up. So the bells came into the port of Jacksonville from England, from the Taylor Bell Foundry. They came over by ship. They then were loaded onto rail car and then brought up from the railroad by truck. And so you can imagine that kind of so much infrastructure in 1927, 28. And so they were brought in through this wall and then hoisted to the top to the bell chamber and hung up at the top. And people ask us, well, how many times do you need to tune the bells, right? And we always laugh. You only need to tune bells every 300 years. So the good news is we won't have to worry about who's going to tune those bells and how they're going to do that. That is 200 years away. So this is our vertical sundial. If you do the math, you can, do the calculations and you'll be able to come up with the time. And it's surrounded by the zodiac. And we just completed this project. There were other pieces of the tower in 1929 that were gilded. So the tower did sparkle. It was this beautiful gold sparkling tower on the hill. Over time, that gild wore away. So we were able to go in this summer and actually re-gild the gnomon, is what that is. So the gnomon is what casts the shadow so that you can tell time. And so it is tranquil. We do sunset concerts in the spring and the fall, and this is the perfect place to really watch the sun go down, as Geert de Hollander, who is our carillonneur, probably one of the world's greatest carillonneurs, plays you kind of, I call it an adult lullaby. It's a very beautiful evening concert, and these gardens just are bathed in this beautiful golden light. It's probably the prettiest light in Florida. It's beautiful pictures. And this place has a natural breeze, regardless if it's, the warmth of summer. It will be up here. We're bathed in this real shade. And you'll just see, the squirrels will come by and say hello. The birds will come around. And it's just this place to kind of rediscover yourself. You never lose that sense of, wow, this is an amazing place. This is a place for me to reconnect. So we always see couples that will have their books, or maybe they have a picnic. You're welcome to bring a picnic lunch and enjoy it on the grounds. Or, grab a snack from our cafe and bring it up here and enjoy it. So it's just a place to get away from everything and, just be surrounded in beauty everywhere you look. And that was some of his writing. It was beauty, beauty everywhere. That's what he wanted. And I think we accomplished that today, and that continues to be our mission. So we'll kind of finish our walk through the gardens as we go around, so we can see all the sides of the tower. There is carvings all the way around. On this panel too, as well as the other side, you can see the tortoise and the hare, these flamingos, there are the pelicans. This was one of the last structures that Milton Maderi created. He was given the gold medal for architecture. It's kind of the culmination of his life work on this tower. There were many other awards that these artisans received for their work here. You may hear off in the distance, we do have shuttle service. So we do have shuttles that will take you from the visitor center to the tower if you have trouble with the walk. So you can see again that window work, that beautiful sculpture by Lee Lowry. And then Milton Medary actually signed the tower underneath. And the tower will celebrate its 90th anniversary, February 1st, 2019. So it's a very exciting time for us. So please take a look at our website and learn about all the things that we have. We have special events, we have concerts, wonderful horticulture displays. There's always something happening here in the gardens. And we hope you'll visit us and come see us here in Lake Wales. Make a day of it. And there's so many attractions in Polk County as well, so you can make a weekend of it actually, and really enjoy a great time with your family. It is great for multi-generations as well, so you know, everything from toddlers that can enjoy our Hammock Hollow. Teenagers love, we are probably the best place for a selfie in Central Florida, so we have plenty of teenagers that are getting pictures taken. We have couples, if you want to do your engagement photos, you're welcome to come here and do your engagement photos. So there's always a little bit of something for everyone. And if you want to learn more about us, you can visit our website, which is bachtower.org, has our calendar of events, all the things that happen. And you know, we really live by the philosophy of Edward Bach's grandmother. It was actually his grandmother that gave him this phrase, to make the world a bit better and more beautiful because you've lived in it. And at the end of the day, if we can say that we've done that for our visitors, we've accomplished the mission that Edward Bach gave us nearly 90 years ago. And so anytime I take a tour group around, I really encourage them at the end to think about how they're going to make the world a more beautiful place when they leave here. So I hope you'll do that same thing now that you've been inspired. Come visit us and then take our mission back and make the world a bit more beautiful too. So thank you for visiting with us, and please come take a walk in our gardens.